Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to the Mastering Monitoring in N-Central, your path to proactive IT management, otherwise known as the 1-hour condensed monitoring bootcamp. So let's get started. This content may contain any forward-looking statements regarding future product plans or development efforts. What this basically means in terms of a legal disclaimer is that I don't get to make decisions around when enhancements or new features come out. So if I talk about something that may come out, you cannot take that as a promise to deliver because product plans and priorities do change. Okay, so everyone is on mute. Please use the questions pane. This bootcamp is for you, so get the most out of it. Ask questions at any time. Let me know if I have any audio issues. I am using an old dilapidated headset right now because I left mine at work. I can't even tell if my audio is working. The session is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube and enable you in the days ahead. Okay, so who am I? My name is Jason Murphy. I'm one of 7 head nerds here at Enable. I'm primarily the head nerd for all things N-Central, along with head nerd number 2. His name is Paul Kelly. So we spend much of our time on N-Central, but hopefully at this point you know who I am. Just want to let you know that there is an all-star program. So if you come to boot camps or master classes, if you're an advocate or even a reference, you accumulate all of these points. And then when we have our Empower event, which is happening in Berlin, May of next year, we will then unveil rewards to those who accumulate the most. Just to let you know, we do have roadshows coming up. So if you're in the European side of the planet, we do have Rotterdam and Berlin on September 3rd and 4th. If you're on the US side of the planet, we have New York, Anaheim, and Boston. Now, here's the QR code, or you can simply just go on over to n-able.com/events, and you can register there. Cool. One little plug for my good buddy, Chris Massey. He has a podcast called Now That's It, or Now That's IT, Stories of MSP Success. He is doing this whole podcast around successful MSPs and what they have done, so you can obviously do a lot of the same things. That is on Spotify and also on YouTube. Now, I'm going to kick off one poll. I usually do 2, but because we're a little short on time, only because we're doing a condensed version, how experienced are you with customs monitoring services in N-Central? Pardon me. 1, I've never imported or created one. 2, I've imported a few services. Or 3, I've created a few services. Or 4, I create services all of the time. Or if you're Sebastian, are you here just to point farm for all-star points? That happens as well, and that's okay. I'm just glad everyone is here. 80% have said, I have never imported or created one. Well, I have to tell you, this is the bootcamp for you. Actually, it is now changed, so I'll keep it open for another 5 seconds or so. And I'll close that, I'll show you the results. 67% of you have said, I have never imported or created one. 33% have said, I have created a few services. Okay, cool. All right, so let's move on from there. And let me just make sure I'm good. I'm on track here. You can see my screen. Okay, so we're not going to pay attention to an agenda slide only because much of what you see here is from the original monitoring bootcamp, and I should have changed it, but I didn't. My apologies. Just know that there's no labs today. We're going to go through monitoring from top to bottom, rules, filters, custom services, event logs, you name it, we're going to go through it. Okay, so a checklist for today: access to N-Central, ideally with admin credentials, hopefully Automation Manager installed in your computer, and assuming that you already know how to launch and install Automation Manager. And if you don't, open up N-Central, go to the Actions menu, click on Automation Manager and install it. Okay, pretty straightforward. So we're going to do a few things at a high level, some foundational stuff. It's going to take about 5 minutes. What is a service? Well, a service is monitoring in N-central, or a custom service, or a custom monitor. I use the term interchangeably. Now, what is a service? A service is a container of service items, or what we call data points, right? So if you look below, you have disk C. This is the service. Below that, when you click into disk C, you will see things like total disk size, disk space used, disk free space, and disk usage percent. Now, in here are all of those data points, right? Service items are data points that can be collected and assigned to a threshold. As you can see, you can turn thresholds on or off. Services can have one or more service items. Now, what is a service continued? At a basic level, services are pulled or queried from one of three. It says devices, it's not a device, it's actually what we call an appliance, which is agent, probe, or the N-central server. 99% of the time, everything is coming from the agent. Some things do come from the probe, depending on what you're monitoring, like VMware, for example, or a switch or a firewall. And even less are coming directly from the N-central server itself. However, if you want to monitor something like a public website, if you want to monitor the certificate or HTTPS, you could do that directly from the N-central server. One of the questions I had this morning is, do I need a pro license to do any custom monitoring? 100%. The reason being is, well, one, we no longer have an essential license. Okay, so we don't offer that anymore. If you have them, great, you can still use them. However, if you are going to manage devices with custom monitoring, that is what we call management, and that is where you need a professional license. Services can run on a schedule set when configuring the service. Ideally, what this basically means is that you can query and pull the device or devices on a schedule every 5 minutes, 15, 30, 45, an hour, 4 hours, a day. Just know that whenever I talk about polling a device, I always kind of err to what is most important. So if you have a mission critical service that you need to know, like on a server, for example, where an agent goes down, well, 5 minutes would be great. However, if you're monitoring something like a BitLocker key, well, probably once a day is enough. You're not going to necessarily need, to monitor that every 5 minutes, right? So always kind of, pull your monitoring based on what you think is best. What are the possible states of a service? Obviously, normal, warning, and failed are pretty straightforward. Normal means the monitoring, it falls within the thresholds, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 to infinite. Effectively, what that means is if you have normal monitoring, it's in the normal range. So it's sitting in between, say it's sitting at 8. Warning has now breached normal into the warning area. So effectively, this could be 11 to 12, and this could be 13 to infinite, right? So effectively, if anything goes from a normal or into a failed, so you can actually sometimes even bypass a warning. Failed means it's now sitting in that failed state. For example, I'm querying the last modified folder time in days. It's now exceeded 20 some days. That basically means I'm not writing backups to a folder anymore. Okay, so that's a good way to understand if backups are now, being migrated over to a file share. What is misconfigured and stale? For example, when you have misconfigured monitoring, pardon me, when you have misconfigured monitoring, what essentially that means is that you're querying a device and you've actually queried something that does not make sense back to N-central. It's queried, it's come back, and it's like, okay, well, this isn't intelligible to me. So the server is saying, this is now misconfigured. It's effectively an error state. What is stale? Stale is monitoring that was working, that is no longer working. And that is configured in most cases in the central server as well. You can query device 5, 7, 10 times. And if it doesn't come back with anything, that means the monitoring is now stale. No data is usually the initial state when you apply custom monitoring. And disabled means, well, effectively, you have monitoring that was working or not working and you have disabled it. You've turned it off. Now, I'm not a big proponent of disabling monitoring. I'm a big proponent of removing monitoring en masse if not needed. but not disabling monitoring. Okay. Using services. You can apply services to devices in different ways: through a rule, manually by adding a template to a device or multiple devices. So you can add a template to one single device or a series of devices. Manually by adding a service to devices or multiple devices, okay? Either through a template or through the service itself. Now, I'm going to show you what that one looks like right now. If I can just pull up my End Central server, where did you go? Okay, let's pull that over. Get him away, Slack. There we are. Now, if I come down to my lab, again, I'm going to filter on just all servers. Servers dash Windows, apply, get rid of Polo. There we are. Here's all of my servers. Now, in here, I can go into a device. Now, this was running, well, here, let me find a device that's actually working here. Much of my lab is in a pretty shambled state. But if I come in here, right, I can click on Add a single device and go in and look at all of the custom monitoring or all the monitoring in Central, and I can add in monitoring. Put a 1 beside it, turn it on, and then you're going to see this particular monitor getting added in. Again, that initial state is no data, and eventually it will either turn into normal, warning, or failed, right? But as you can see, it's already here, so we know that it's green. Now, another way, service template. I can do that to a single device. I can add a service template based on the bundles of monitoring of service templates in my system, and I can come in and add in Lab 6, click OK, and I've added that in. Now, equally, I can do it en masse. If I go to the all device view, maybe I want to select all devices except these 2 devices. Same thing, I can apply service templates up here and come in and choose my particular service template and add that in. Or I can now do the exact same thing en masse using rules. So I want to come into monitoring, rules. Let's go down to servers. And maybe there's a particular server template I want to add in. Go to monitoring options, and then you can see that I have a number of templates sitting here already. And then I can come down and add in, let's see here, Cove backup monitoring on servers. Add that in, save, and then I'm done. So again, effectively, you can use service templates, you can do it individually, you can group, you can filter the way you need to, so that you can apply service templates the way you need to. Now, what are filters? Filters in Central, I mean, this is pretty standard 101 type stuff. We all use filtering in websites. Filters are metadata criteria that allows us to group or select devices based on what we want in dashboard views, reports, and in rules. What is a template? A template is effectively a bundle of services or monitoring, okay, that you can apply to devices using threshold, self-healing, and also in bulk. What is a rule? Rules are just like your rules in Microsoft Outlook, right? If email comes in from Sebastian, it goes directly into deleted items. I'm just kidding, Sebastian, I wouldn't do that to you, but it's one of those things that when you set up the criteria, what happens is when that next thing or next device or next email comes in, the rule then applies the automation. What is a notification profile? Every time you've add in any kind of monitoring from the cookbook, whether you've built yourself, sure, you can add in the custom service, but you also need to add in the corresponding notification profile. If you want notifications, if you want tickets, you have to also complete this. A notification profile contains who to notify and when, and it's linked to a trigger or multiple triggers. A notification trigger sends a notification when that service, right? So you're creating a profile, and then basically what you're going to do is tie it to the custom monitoring and the custom service when it goes into certain states. Why use custom services? Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're going to get right into it. Why use custom services? Obviously, flexible and easy to import. The cookbook has close to 200 custom services readily available for you to use today. Hundreds of services are available online, and you can build your own services. One of the defining things, people ask me all the time, like I go to conferences or I meet prospects or new partners, are like, tell me why, N-central is different than all of the other RMMs out there. 1, rules. 2, service templates. The reason being is effectively, if you can query something, you can monitor it. Now, and you can do much of the same thing as some of the other platforms. The difference is Enable allows it to scale. You're not having to do these things again and again and again. I can now set it and forget it using that rules-based engine. Okay. Now, where to find custom services? Well, first, let's go Google Foo a little bit. So if I come into, for example, me.n-able.com, this is our partner portal, Enable Me. Well, my link took me directly to the cookbook, but if I go directly to Enable Me, you'll see this page where you can log in, or you can simply go directly to our automation cookbook. And this is where you can find all of the automation and custom monitoring directly exposed here. This is all public. You don't even need a login. So if you want to come in and take all the PowerShell, by all means, there are 196 PowerShell scripts that you can, grab right here. If you want the custom monitoring, much of that is proprietary to N-central or to N-site, but this is where you come into custom service or script check, and this is where you can come in and find exactly what you want. Okay, so for example, if I want to monitor the enabled take control status, I think this was built by my colleague, Paul Kelly, but this is where you can come in here and add in this monitoring to all of your Windows-based devices so that you can monitor them, ensuring that take control is always going to work for you. Okay, and if it's not, at least you can generate tickets and have somebody troubleshoot it or what have you. Okay, now if I come in here and I simply click on that and download, okay, this gives me an XML document. Well, what the heck does this mean? Well, this is how N-central understands monitoring. Okay, we can build monitoring several ways, and I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. But from a coded point of view, once we build the monitoring, it's actually saved into what is called, well, typically it's saved into what is called an AMP, but natively, it is simply just an XML, okay? Now, if I come back here and I go here, the next one we're going to do is creating your own custom services. Step 1, deploying a custom service. So I've gone to the cookbook, or I found monitoring, maybe another MSP friend of mine, and that happens. A lot of MSPs do share, is that they've sent you something, or you've grabbed something from the cookbook. Well, how do you deploy it? This is where you come into N-central, and you come into administration. If I go to custom services, you will see several options, right? Some videos at the top. You can add an AMP-based policy, log scanned, syslog, SNMP. You can even build WMI monitoring. Not that a lot of people rely on WMI too much anymore. Back in the day, that's all we had. Now there's something called SIM, which for Microsoft, or Windows Query Language, allows you to effectively use PowerShell to do all of that. But this is where you come in and now choose import. If you have an XML format, you're going to import the XML, okay? So custom service XML file location. I'm going to go to my downloads, and here it is. I can now import that. Now I did that this morning, so it may already be there. I guess maybe I didn't click it, or I have it twice, one of the two. Either way, it's now in my system, okay? And now I can do something with it. I can add that monitoring, now that it's in my system, directly into a single device, into multiple devices. I can add it into multiple devices using a service template, and then I can add it into multiple devices into a service template via rule. So you can grow this as granular or as robust as you need it to be. The reason why I'm a big proponent of rules is that rules allow you to standardize. Again, like the use case I gave you about, Sebastian's email coming in, is that I know every time Sebastian emails me, because he's always trying to, get me on board with his MSP and he wants to do business with me, but I'm not interested. I can put it directly into the trash if I want to. Again, not that I would do that to Sebastian, but it's one of those things that is a standardization technique. That is why rules are so important. We come back here. Let's create an automation-based custom service. Okay, so I did this a little bit earlier, so we're going to be able to move a little bit faster than before. If I go into my downloads and I pull that over, here is my DNS filter monitoring for Nsight. Now, the good news is it's interchangeable for N-Central. So if I want here, I can go to the cookbook, download it, put it on my computer, or equally, if I go to N-Central and I launch Automation Manager, collapse everything here, actions, start Automation Manager, click OK. Cancel that. And here's Automation Manager. Now, because I've launched it from N-Central, I have an option here that says Open Policy from N-Central. This is where I can come in and go into Control. And here's the N-Central Take Control check. Okay, right. So I can come in, I can view that, I can modify it, I can change it, I can maybe change any inputs or global variables, whatever it might be. Maybe there's an output parameter I need to modify, what have you. Okay. Maybe there's another piece of code I want to add in that's going to output information that I find valuable outside of what Paul has already done. Once I have this, right, once I've modified it or changed it or what have you, I can now upload it. Also, I'll just overwrite this instead of uploading as a new file. So I've overwritten the one that was already on N-Central, but now I can come in here and go to configuration, service templates, add, I'll call this take control monitoring 2. I can come in and now type in, and I'm going to do this one for servers. Again, monitoring is device class specific. If you create a service template for a monitoring for servers and you want it for workstations or laptops, you're going to have to create it for workstations and also laptops. Okay, so if I come in here, let's not highlight everything. Take control, add. Now I could modify some of the thresholds if I wanted to. I could even add in self-healing. Okay, now I can save. Now I can go into my all device view, choose a couple of my servers that I want to add this to, apply that service template, and I can click apply, thus adding it to those 3 or 4 servers. Or what I can do again is I can come into rules, I can come down into, for example, servers, where are you, servers, -Windows. And then from here, I can add that in. So I can come down to where you take control, monitoring 2, and I can add that in, save. And now effectively, if you come down here, you'll see that little star saying it's in progress. It's now applying that service template to all of the devices within that filter. That filter is the same as the rule name, which is servers-Windows. They're exact same. So rule name, servers-Windows, filter, server-Windows. And again, now I'm applying this for every customer that comes into my N-Central. I want every single one of my customers, either present or future, to always get this particular monitor. That's why this isn't so important, standardization. If you have any questions on automation-based custom services, now would be the time to ask. Now let's talk a little bit about Windows event log monitoring. Okay, so if I come back to N-Central and I go to a device, I'm going to go to Server 2022. I'm going to click on Add. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, the reason why I'm picking on a server is servers have different functions and applications that they're servicing. So oftentimes there's certain unique needs. This is where event logs are really handy. Windows does a great job of kind of exposing where problems already are. They're just buried in an event log. It's not like an event log is going to throw you an email or a ticket and go, hey, by the way, I'm seeing, event log. Here, let me get rid of this and my email in general. Let me close that. There. And try that again. There we are. Now it's closed. Okay. But this is where I can come in, and because of that server, I can add in very specific monitoring. Now, I'm going to do a generic one for you. Just know there's two types of Windows Event Log. There is effectively a Windows Event Log Monitoring Basic and Windows Event Log Monitoring Advanced. So there's Windows Applications and Services Log, and then there's Windows Event Log, right? I can apply those, and as you can see, they're already added to this server. This is where I can now configure them. Now, under the Windows Applications and Services log, you go to Service Details. You would click something like, I'm going to choose Security. It doesn't have to be. You can browse anything in here and choose, let's see, DNS. Click Save. I want something on error. If I ever see a DNS error on my particular server using, let's find something. Windows Event Log ID for DNS errors. There we go. 5774. All right, perfect. We'll just steal that one. Okay. So if we see 5774 on a Windows event log error on a Windows server, we could effectively get a notification, right? That's exactly what this will do. Now, this is the Windows Applications and Services log. Also, when it comes in here, I would also call this Windows Event DNS. Here, get out of there. DNS error, okay? Something like that. I would also copy and paste that into the service identifier. Error, caps lock, there we go. And then click OK. Okay, and then you can see that the one I just customized is right here. Now there is the old school standard kind of Windows XP version of Windows Event Log. I believe this changed in Windows, they might be Vista or 8.1. I can't remember what version it changed, but this is what we would have in terms of the old Windows basic event logs. One does applications as well as Windows events. For example, if you install an application and it exposes information into a Windows event logs, Veeam is one, I'll pick on Veeam. They actually push information into Windows event logs so that you can then take those event logs and notify them, okay? Again, failure on security. If I want to come in here and add a condition on include, well, what I can do is 4625. Every time I see event ID 4625, it will then throw out a Windows logon issue, okay? So that is why I would come in here and call it event log login errors. something like that. And there you have it. It's just that easy. So you can get a lot of value from Windows event logs. Now, that being said, if you've ever looked through Windows event logs, they're pretty noisy. So again, your includes, your excludes, including things like regex or what have you, is going to be very, very important to kind of keeping a lot of quality control around those Windows event errors. What else? What else do we have? We have SNMP. Now, we have a little bit of time. I was a little bit behind on this morning's boot camp, and I spent a little extra time on SNMP. I'm going to breeze through this really quickly, only because I do literally a 2-hour boot camp on this. So, because it can be rather involved. Give me 1 second here. There's some security software I have to meddle with. Okay, I believe I should be good to go here. Let me just try that one more time. There we go, it actually worked. This did not come up on this morning's bootcamp, so I'm glad it worked now. But as you can see, if I come in here and I want to even come in and address something like localhost, I don't know if I have SNMP turned on or not, but if I do public, click OK, and then I kind of do let's do get next. Nah, that's not going to work. Of course, I don't have SNMP turned on my laptop. That would be too easy. But then again, for the purposes of IT security, they're not going to allow me to do that. Just know is that if you have a Linux device, a NAS, a SAN, a switch, firewall, router, all you need to do is configure the IP address and also come into, where are you here? Sorry, advanced. And all you need is the read community string. So as long as it can handshake the IP and also the community string, it will then give you a list of information called OIDs, okay? Object identifiers. Now the object identifier is effectively all the specific information around the device. Is it using, multicast? Is it using, is multicast turned on or off? What ports are and their statuses, the name of the device, the firmware version. There's a lot of great stuff. And again, if you go to the cookbook and look at the monitoring I built for Palo Alto, you will see that there's some really good examples in there, and you can actually mimic a lot of what is that I built into something like maybe FortiGate or something else. Okay. Anyways, that's a quick walkthrough. Again, I take 2 hours and go through this from top to bottom with you. So there's a whole dedicated boot camp. So that if you're looking to do firewall monitoring or switch monitoring or any kind of non-agent based monitoring, that is exactly where SNMP comes in. Okay. Now, log analysis or syslog. Okay. Now, this one is actually probably let me say that again. This one is probably one of the most underutilized aspects of monitoring in N-central that is effectively very easy to set up. All you need to do is when you have a server or whatever device is running a probe in your customer environment, is that when you install a probe, there are 2 active services that are running. One is the Windows probe service, and then the other one is the Windows, effectively it's our watchdog service. If the Windows probe services stops, the watchdog then tries to restart it. But there is another service, and that is the Windows probe syslog service. You need to turn that on, right? And you need to turn it on as automatic, so that it is always on. So when you reboot the servers or the server, that it remains on when it comes back up. Now, the important part here is what can we do with syslog? Now, if I come into, let's go into, where are you, syslog? Here, let me collapse everything here. Okay, if I go add, and then I come into service, you will see syslog. Now, it's fairly easy to build something in syslog, okay? So for example, now that I have pointed my firewall logs directly to my probe, I can now capture those logs. And effectively what happens is those logs will then get pushed to the probe service or the probe server, and effectively we can now scan those logs. And when we scan those logs, we can actually grab information, right? So for example, let's just say FortiGate. I'll pick on FortiGate again, okay? I'll call it FortiGate port error. And I'm making this up as I go, but I'm using this as just a prime example, is that you would create a regular expression. So something like, hard bracket, and then you would do error, go E, R, 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 O, R. And then you could do something like 1524. Maybe there's an error code that goes along with it. Now, when you do something like this, if you see this based on the regex value that you're putting in, are you looking for, and by the way, that would probably be something like this. Anyways, if you go to regex pal, here, this is what I normally use because I suck at regex. Regex tester, where's regex pal? That could have been bad. There we go. This is the one I usually use. Okay, so in here you can put in your regular expression and your test string and then use that. This is what I use to kind of format regex effectively so that I know it's going to work. But when you come in here, if you see that string, display that string as matched normal or failed. So if I see error 1524, I'm going to fail on that as opposed to normal. Okay, if I don't see it, normal. If I do see it, failed, or vice versa. Okay, add that in, and you can call it FortiGate error, something like that. I have to spell it correctly. FortiGate error. There we go. And that's it. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that I do have a lab manual for all of this. Bear with me for one moment because I'm going to grab it right now. And I'm going to put that into the webinar. Here it is. And let me go to handouts. Now, if you look to the handout section of your GoToWebinar, you will see that there is a PDF there that has an actual example worthwhile. Just know that I'm not the strongest in regex. We all have our technical limitations. Mine's regex for sure. So it's one of those things that if you go to the index, you will see where we're doing syslog, and you can actually use that example. Okay, so let me come back to the PowerPoint. Custom properties. Okay, now as you're aware, custom properties are used in various ways in N-central. One, you can use them for inputs and outputs of information. So effectively, you can take information and store it into N-central, for example, like a BitLocker key. There are two types of custom properties. One is a customer or site level property, better known as a custom org property. And the other one is a device property, okay? Device level property or device custom property, okay? Now you can use these in several ways, okay? So let me show you some examples here. If I come in here and I go into first things first, administration, custom properties, I'm going to create a customer property, and then there's 5 different types for each one. Okay. Date type, the storing of dates. Text type, the storing of a string. URL, pretty straightforward, the storing of a URL. Dropdown allows you to configure several different data points within the custom property. And then you have a password type. Effectively, a password type is then once hidden, once saved. Okay. So for example, you have a unique identifier that you don't want any other tech to see. You could effectively use that as a password type. Okay. Get rid of that. Now I'm going to go to by device, and I'm going to use text type. So for example, from here, I want to use BitLocker key, and then I'm going to leave this blank, but I want to apply this to all workstations and laptops. Okay. Now I can do it by operating system as well. I'm not going to do that. There are just too many operating systems to choose from here, so I'm just going to use workstations and laptops. Then I click save. Now what effectively has happened is that in the background, I have a custom device property field that has been added to every single laptop and workstation with that custom device property called BitLocker key, or keys with a Z or Z. Okay. Now, if I go to device, reset, go to my workstations and laptops. Oop. Of course, that's going to stay on there forever now. Get off. Well, triple click's not getting rid of it either. Either way, it'll sit there. Now, when I come here into settings and then I go into custom properties, you will now see that there it is, BitLocker keys with a blank. Now, how do I populate that with a BitLocker key? Okay, well, what I can do is use automation to push information in here. How do I do that? If I come into monitoring, or let's say scheduled tasks. Let's just do it through a scheduled task. Okay, I'll go into a profile. I'm going to call it BitLocker key export. I'll click add automation manager policy. Now I've already taken the BitLocker key automation off of the cookbook and put it into Incentral. Okay. No, that's not the one I wanted. I think it was the first one. I think it's this one. It is. Now, okay, typically I'm only looking for drives. You can do multiple drives with this if you wanted to. I'm just going to focus on something like C. So if I manage to find something like C drive, I can map that to a custom property. I'm not going to, but I do want to map the key. Okay, so if I come in here and I go into, where are you here, BitLocker keys, I now have encrypted drive 1 found BitLocker keys, and that's going to be C, by the way. I'm going to schedule this. Let's say I'm going to run this recurring every 4 hours. Now I'd probably do once a day, but okay. Now I can repeat this every something like, let's see here. Let's go hourly and we'll do every 23, okay? And then I'll do that every day of the week, okay? And now I can click save. I would probably give this a new name like BitLocker key export automation. And then click save. Now I would save it again. And now that I have a scheduled task profile, what I'm able to do is come into my rule. Again, the key is standardization here. And then I already built it. I'm going to choose those Windows workstations and laptops. I'm going to push that across all of my customers. And then I'm going to go to schedule task profile where I can add in the automation for BitLocker key export. You have something very turnkey now. You have the automation, effectively the PowerShell that's going to run across the device every 4 hours, right? It's going to run that and then map it directly to N-Central as an export where it can contain that BitLocker key, okay? And if I go to the device, let me find a physical device as a workstation laptop here. Usually Mark has a Precision or something in here. There it is, okay? So we've got Paul Kelly's BitLocker key, not that you'll ever need that, but he may. So it's one of those things where, again, you have that key that you can use at any time. For example, if CrowdStrike was to ever happen again, right? I had a lot of partners call me on that particular day asking for help, going, hey, I know you can do BitLocker key exports. How do you do it now? Too little, too late. All of your customers are now blue screened. You wanted to set that up, previously, right? So just know that this kind of stuff can really save you down the road. Now, what's another use case, right? So let's go into, again, custom properties. I've already pre-built this, but I do want to show you that you can do things like patch groups. So say, for example, you have a very large customer and you've got 500 devices. Do you want to patch all of them all at the same time? Do you want to use a test group that some devices get patched first and then other devices get patched later? All of that can be done using custom properties. So if we come into, well, some partners call them rings. That's what Microsoft calls them for Intune, patch rings. You can do patch days of the week, right? You can do a patch emergency override. For example, I'll give you a prime example here. Let me just build it for you. You go to rules and you build something called emergency server reboot. Okay. Now, what you're going to do is one, you're not going to put in a filter. That's one way to do it. Or two, I'm going to select my biggest customer here, Celtic Cider. And then what this custom property should do is that if I come into the filter, and I believe I built this, let me see if I can find it right here. I was trying to save myself some time. Let me see, one sec. No, this isn't it. I'll have to build it. So let's go into custom properties, add by device, and I'll use a drop down. So we'll call this emerge reboot at 3 a.m. Okay, I'm going to add, this is my default, I'm going to call this null. Okay, effectively nothing. This one's going to be 3 a.m. on, let's go Friday. Well, let's not do a Friday. No change Fridays. Okay, so we'll go Wednesday. Okay, 3 a.m. Monday. Okay, something like that. Okay, then I'm going to do this only for servers. And then if I come into that rule again, let me just refresh. Effectively, all I need to do is build the filter with that custom property. And again, filters, add, device, where you custom device property. Forgot what I called it. I called it merge. Okay, it's now set to null right now though, right? So equal to null, call it 3 a.m., save. And then when I go into the rule, I now call, here, I gotta refresh that again, sorry. Okay, but this one is set to null right now, right? I'm gonna do this across all of my customers. Well, I'll even propagate that to everyone. Here, I'll actually do it for one customer because there's no chance that you're gonna wanna reboot every single one of your customers at 3 a.m. So let's just do it for Celtic, okay? And then for the custom property, which is built into the here, all I need to do is build in the maintenance window or the functionality that will address the scheduled reboot, right? So say it's a scheduled reboot immediate instead of 3 a.m. I know I'm conflating things, but I could call this 3 a.m. emerge reboot. I can build in the functionality to do either Monday or Wednesday or Friday or whatever the days I want to include this. Click save. So now I've got the functionality. I've got my emerge reboot at 3 a.m. Now, because it's set to null and it's not doing anything at any point, it's just a kind of a dormant rule ready to go, is that now all I need to do is come into the custom property for emerge. Where are you here? So when I have the use case of going, hey, there is a 0-day vulnerability. We've patched the devices. I need them to reboot tonight. Well, it's a Tuesday. Well, I'm going to do this on 3 a.m. on Wednesday. Now I can flip it, right? So now it's going to hit that maintenance window, which comes next. It's not going to be Friday or Monday because I have to wait a whole other week. It's going to be the Wednesday. Click save and propagate. It's now going to update that across all of the devices in the rule, and then all of the devices are going to get that immediate emergency patch reboot. That is a super effective way to accomplish tasks when you have scripts and routines that are already pre-built for you. Eric, you have a question here. Can you do a video on that BitLocker key store from the start to finish? I think it's important and also a great way to learn from the features involved. Sure can. In fact, I already have. If you go to Enable You, and look at custom and do a search for custom properties, you'll see there's a video, hour long, so you might have to filter through it to get to the right area, but either Paul or myself do a walkthrough on how to do that from top to bottom. Again, this is only an hour boot camp as opposed to a hour and a half long custom properties boot camp. So I kind of breezed through some of this. So I apologize if you miss some steps, but just know it's definitely doable. And if you need help or what have you, we have partner success engineers. Reach out to your PSM. We can get you the help. It'll only take 15, 20 minutes to walk you through it. It's really easy. Once you get it once or twice, you'd be like, oh man, I can export a ton of things into N-Central. And that's it. That's it for today. If you have any questions, or if there was, again, like Eric pointed out, I kind of maybe breezed through the automation portion of the BitLocker key piece. Just know that I can get you in touch with people that can help you. So send me a quick email. My email is letter J, MURPHY at n-able.com. And if there's no other questions, thank you for your attendance today, and I'll see you on the next bootcamp. Take care.